Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Turn Bark Time, Season 2, Episode 3. I am the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we are going to be here a long time. Welcome back this week. Another couple big events going on around that we could talk about. One of the biggest events that we need to stress, that needs to be said, and I don't think got enough street cred, was your Seattle Storm are WNBA WNBA champions. I almost said national, I don't know why. 4 times. Super dope. Ordered 2 new shirts. I'm pretty pumped. I coach girls basketball, so it's kind of a cool thing. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. Even though I just wanted to give a little shout out. Barker, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, it's election season. Everybody's favorite season. You get random people knocking on your door. I had a guy knock on my door at my new house and was like, "Hi, I'm here supporting Brian Blake for, state office." And I'm like, "Oh, hi, I teach civics at the high school." And he was like, "Oh, you're probably the most informed voter that I've come across." And I was like, "Have a nice night." And he didn't argue and handed me the material. And I was like, "Yep, I'm familiar with his talking points." I go, "We talked about it in class." And he was like, "Awesome. Have a good night."
Love it.
So tonight we're going to talk about the vice presidential debate. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Lord of the Flies.
Zing.
So we're looking at this. So this was there's been 4 debates that have been scheduled. It's by the Committee for Presidential Debates. I believe is the title of the group or something like that.
Commission for President.
Commission. Sorry.
I think.
Yeah. We don't like the word committee in America.
Zing.
Anywho, so we had Trump and Biden get into a scream fest, 2 weeks ago, and we had a much more civil evening last night with Senator Kamala Harris. I'm trying to figure out, this side, there she is, as debating against current Vice President Mike Pence at the University of Utah.
Yes.
In Salt Lake City.
Correct.
Moderated by Susan Page of USA Today, a newspaper, which some people thought was an odd choice for a moderator, considering that newsprint does not do live interviews. Mm-hmm. Maybe wondering about her ability to moderate. And again, while this debate was not as contentious as the previous installment, people still say that the moderators are lacking in moderation.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about her, I did some digging on her just to try and kind of figure out who she was. I'd never heard of her before. And she's actually, so I think she's been through 18 presidential campaigns is what she said. She's been interviewed and been a part of, or not been a part of, that's not the right term, but interviewed, I think 7 presidents. And what's crazy is she actually wrote Barbara Bush's biography, and she's currently working on Nancy Pelosi's biography, which is also an interesting tidbit because there are some people that were upset because obviously, Barbara Bush and the former Bush administration has actually been outspoken against some of Trump's policies and things that he's done. And obviously Nancy Pelosi is very against what the Trump administration and everything like that. So some people thought that was an unfair moderator for this debate.
Well, and Kamala Harris even pointed out that was one of her, when there was kind of a question about, are you going to work with the other side or can you cross the aisle? She says, we have 7 former cabinet members from the Bush administration supporting our campaign. And you look at, there's the growing Lincoln Project, which is a group of Republicans that are not supporting President Trump or the Republican nomination. And they're calling them, it's essentially the Lincoln Project, right? Like Abraham Lincoln, kind of going back to what they think. If you know your history, you'll know that the old school Republicans during the Civil War were actually more like Democrats today. So I'm not sure what that means, whether they're saying that they're actually Democrats or
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly the whole reasoning behind the name, but
Yeah, I took it back as like her, probably because it's the most staunch Republican is not the word I'm looking for. It's the most renowned Republican, I guess, is the easiest way to say it, right? So you would tie, even though Lincoln's Republicanism is not modern day Republicanism, which is fine, right? They're just going off of that. Interesting facts though, like so completely different kind of setup for this debate than the previous debate. Trump and Biden were standing behind podiums. I want to say they were 12 feet from each other too, I think was what they were saying. And this time you had Senator Harris and Vice President Pence sitting at desks, and they were 12 feet apart from each other, but two plexiglass shields in between. And that had a lot to do with President Trump's recent diagnosis with the COVID-19, and just increasing precautions for the group.
One of the reasons that I first thing I did when they said that they were going to sit down is I looked up what the height difference is between the two candidates. Kamala Harris is 5'2", and Mike Pence is 5'10", and so I think part of it is they didn't want Pence to look physically imposing next to Kamala Harris and have that be kind of like an intimidation thing. They didn't want her to look like they just, you know what I mean? If you have somebody who's taller than the other, it just, you naturally think of them dominating the other. And I think the Trump side of things wanted to avoid that. And then I think also it was just to provide a visual where they were on like equal ground.
Yeah.
Right. If you can even see in the pictures behind us, they have them almost shoulder to shoulder. You know, they don't, you can't see the height disparity, because that really shouldn't be, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how tall you are to be president. Yeah. George Washington says yes, but he was 6'2" in a time when people weren't 6'2". He would have played the post.
Yep. So 90 minutes. So just like the first presidential debate, instead of 6 topics, it was 9 topics. And started with the COVID-19 crisis going on in our country. And I'm using the word crisis as my own opinion of how it's being handled and everything like that across the country. So not just my own state, but every state. And Kamala Harris came out firing, attacking the Trump administration, saying that it was one of the worst administrations to ever handle this pandemic or handle a pandemic in that time. What was interesting, though, was that Pence chose his time to also rebut that and point out that Joe Biden was around during the swine flu epidemic that came through the country in, I think it was 2008, 2009. I remember because I had it when I was right before I went to college. So, yeah.
Add that merit badge to your vest.
Was.
I also thought it was interesting too that one of Pence's rebuttals was that essentially the Biden plan is the Trump plan. Mm-hmm. Like, you would have just done what we did, and he kind of played the what if game and said that if swine flu had been as bad as COVID, that they would have killed more people, which when you have like anecdotic evidence like that, it's not as strong as like actual physical evidence that exists in reality. And then the other thing is there was a kind of a personal barb attack there at Biden because he mentioned plagiarism, which harkens back to when Biden tried to run for president earlier, and there was a question about plagiarism somewhere in his history that caused him to pull out of that race at that time. So that was kind of a guarded little jab inside of that. Some people, I've been reading analysis of the debate, and some people are saying that Harris did not strike as hard as she could have at Pence and the Trump administration on the current outbreak in the White House.
Yep.
And part of that is that the perception is right now, if you look at a lot of the national polls, which who knows if we can trust them, because they said last time that Hillary was going to beat Trump and she didn't. So Kamala Harris kind of played, I guess, in a way, like held her ground and like played it safe and like didn't try to be overly aggressive. Plus, she's kind of been painted by the media as this like super aggressive prosecutor, and she didn't want to come across as being a female candidate. Like, unfortunately in our society, like being assertive and being like as soon as you start like speaking your mind and speaking authoritatively, like it's taken in a negative tone by a lot of people in our society, like, and that's unfair. If she had acted in the same way, as Pence had, like people would be up in arms because like, how dare she be so rude to him, and why would she do that? And so I think at times that kind of like handcuffed her from really kind of like taking the gloves off and pushing her advantage as much as she could have. Pence really seemed like he had a lot of like pre-prepared, like they don't get the topics, and so in like the debate world, this is called, it's kind of a mixture of like impromptu and extemp. But like in extemp, like you get time to like, you get topics and you get time to go write. But in impromptu, like you just get a topic and you have to go. And the kids that are really good at impromptu just have a memorized canned speech, and then they make up an intro that somehow ties one of these things to a speech they've already memorized, which is actually not the purpose of impromptu. But that's kind of what Pence did. Like he had some very specific points that he wanted to get to, and he kind of had to find the right opportunity, and some of them fit better than others, to kind of like shoehorn those kind of comments in. And after because like they talked about COVID, and then it moved into like what the role of the president was, or the vice president was, and like if they've talked about succession, and Pence completely ignored that answer. Yeah. Like he chose to use that time to respond to a comment from Senator Harris, and completely like in a debate round, you would say like all of her arguments in the role of the vice president like flow across, because he didn't address that question. He completely took those 2 minutes that he got in uninterrupted that should have been on topic 2 and just went back to topic 1.
Yep. But I think that was kind of a theme throughout the night that you mentioned that. And like, so I'm going to go, I'll go back to I'll start with Pence. What I got from it, and again, reading just some analysis, and I try and read as variety of sources as I can, from CNN to Fox News to Vox to BBC, right? Trying to figure out, the general opinion of a lot of different people. It sounded like Pence was kind of coming in there to deflect. Like he was designed to not necessarily answer the question, and that was what he was trying to do. He felt way more comfortable on the attack of Senator Harris and Joe Biden. What was interesting was that going now to Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, she was supposed to prosecute, but she didn't prosecute Pence. She looked beyond Pence and was trying to prosecute Donald Trump and his presidency as a whole. And both felt better on the attack than trying to defend their president, which I found very interesting. And the fascinating thing about this is somebody asked me today at school, they were like, why even have the vice president's debate? And because John Adams, who was the first vice president, called it the most useless job in our republic. And they didn't, and like you're telling me with the presidential succession, they didn't answer the one question that could matter probably the most in this debate as VPs, is what are you going to do when 78-year-old Joe Biden wins and he's sick or he dies in office? What are you going to do with 76-year-old Donald Trump, who has coronavirus at the moment, right? But what are you going to do if he becomes incapacitated, right? Have you talked about this? And this is the answer. I was looking this question. I didn't obviously know it was coming, but I was like, all right, answer this one. I want to know, because Pence, you're going to have to step up to the plate if Trump goes down. Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, you're going to have to step up to the plate if Biden goes down. Like, tell me what the plan is as an American so I know it's coming.
Neither of them really answered the question. Kamala Harris used it as an opportunity to kind of introduce herself and talk about like her history more than she really answered the question. And she talked a lot about Joe Biden. NBC News had a breakdown of like how much time they spent on each topic, and she spent a good chunk of time throughout the night talking about Joe Biden, like really pushing his name out, kind of being like, he's the front runner. I'm here to support Joe Biden. And it was interesting because like you said, there are some questions that went unanswered. So Pence later in the night, I'm kind of jumping out of chronological order. I hope that's all right. And attacked and asked about like, are you guys going to pack the court? Yep. Right. The same question that Trump asked Biden. And it's pretty unreasonable to expect a vice presidential candidate to give a policy statement that has not already been made by their presidential candidate. So in a way, like, Senator Harris's hands were kind of tied in a precedent, not president, um, in that, like, she's not going to introduce new policy that Biden hasn't made a statement on.
Right.
And it was a great opportunity, and Pence took advantage of it to kind of hammer them on that and be like, well, you guys aren't saying anything. And she kind of, her turn and rebuttal to that was, well, look at how many judges that you guys have appointed. You know, you guys have been pushing through like a record number of judges, which President Trump sees as a victory and as a positive. And she's saying, well, no, it's really a negative because we've changed the rules, instead of having to require 60 senators to approve judges, it's now gone down, which actually the Obama administration changed, bringing it down to 50 or 51, a simple majority. It has made it to be more of a partisan thing, which means the judges are now more ideologically like at the extremes rather being them more in the center. That was a question that went unanswered. Pence, they asked him about Roe v. Wade and women's right to choose if, you know, like Amy Coney Barrett gets on the Supreme Court and they vote against Roe v. Wade, what would he do in his home state of Indiana? And Pence, again, like, very like, I mean, it wasn't even like, he just walked around the question and turned it around and said, you know, like, went back and attacked Biden and Harris about, well, they've been, you know, the Democrats are just, they hate her because she's religious, and they're, you know, they make that seem like it's a negative thing, and I think that's a good thing. So it became less about the issue of women's right to choose or abortion rights, and it became more of like, you know, this character attack that the Democrats are radicals that don't like religion. And Kamala Harris came back with I thought was a decent rebuttal of saying, right, Joe Biden will be the second Catholic president in American history. So, you know, like, you can't say that, like, we hate, like, not all Democrats hate people of religion, like, not that Democrats hate people of religion, but kind of like fighting against that. The line of reasoning, or the line of attack, has been that, right, the Democratic Party is shifting to the left. It's becoming more radical, more like Bernie, more like Elizabeth Warren, like AOC, and they kind of paint in the Green New Deal, right, these dangerous left-wing ideas. And I think Harris did a good job of kind of like pushing back to the center, saying, no, like, you know, like, I have my faith and Biden has his, but we also respect people's right to choose, or women's rights to choose.
She came back with that from the looking at like California. She was asked pretty much the same question, and she said, she's like, I'm always going to fight for a woman's right to choose and everything like that. And the other thing that was like, speaking of the Green New Deal, climate change was one of the topics. And again, Pence skirted when asked, do you believe that man-made climate change is a problem? And he did not answer that. He followed the Trump line of, you know, mismanagement of forests cause wildfires. There's no more hurricanes than there have been, you know, any other time throughout our history. And so he kind of followed along that, where we, you know, Kamala Harris recognizes or claims that, you know, went with climate change is real, and there's science to back that up. So it's kind of, it was interesting. She did miss one key piece. Like, I think she missed one softball that he threw her. And again, it could go back to what you had said about, you know, her being a woman and not having that ability to want to to cast herself as overly aggressive, which again is complete double standard and not fair at all. But he threw out the rule changes, you know, and we said that, and like you talked about, under the Obama administration, the Senate changed the rules to get judges through, and before that, executives, appointees through, to a simple majority. And then they lowered the Supreme Court thresholds, the Republican Senate lowered the Supreme Court threshold to 51. And that became a contentious thing. And so again, when you appointed these more radical judges, you changed the rules and stuff like that. So it can kind of go back and forth. It would have been kind of a moot point, but I was surprised that she didn't bring up the fact that they changed the rules for Supreme Court lifetime appointments, right? But again, it could be countered with the Obama lifetime appointments to federal courts and things like that. So it was overall like a lot more civil debate. I thought Kamala Harris did a good job of, saying like, hey, excuse me, you're interrupting me, and I will finish my point, and then we'll talk, And I thought Pence did a good job. Pence fought for his time. They came out about even in total time talked, is what I saw. But that was with Pence going over and having to interrupt and things like that. So, I mean, he held his ground, which was which was like what the campaign needed.
And I would say that Harris also asserted herself at times. And when Pence would overspeak, she would say, well, I would like
I want
equal
my time
to respond.
Yeah.
And I think at the very end, Paige was saying, well, we're running out of time. And she goes, you can get, like, here's your 30 seconds to make up for, he went over by 30.
It was 15. Like, it wasn't very much.
Yeah.
But she got her point across and things like that. So overall, I mean, it was not the firework dumpster fire that, 2 weeks ago was, but it got a little contentious, but nothing compared to it. But again, like we talked about, your VP candidates shouldn't be, having the match that Biden and Trump had, just because, again, it's considered one of the most useless jobs in our entire nation. So,
but either way, we are going to inaugurate the oldest president in the history of the United States. Knock on wood, barring anybody, pulling a Horace Greeley before, electoral day. But if you don't get that joke, Google it.
Seriously.
So I mean, it is important that we do know who these people are, and I think a good number of people. Pence is not a very, like, he does a lot of stuff kind of like out of the public eye. He's very much kind of on the down low, just kind of working in the background. Not that the VP has to be out front. Again, right? You want the VP, like, his only job is to break ties in the Senate and in the Constitution. That's like the only thing he's told to do, or they are told to do. Make it gender neutral. And then other than that, the president gives them jobs. The president decides what their job is. So you are really the support person. One of the other arguments that keeps coming up is that when they talked about foreign policy, is that Pence focused on, like, we got rid of ISIS, and NATO's paying more than they ever have. We always see, like, they're paying their fair share is the benefit. And, like, I just had this epiphany, like, is the flip side of the argument not, well, when we paid for all of it, like, we had more say. We had more control over what NATO did because we're the money. And by making it more equal, are you not reducing our station? Like, you're in a way, like, you're giving them a quality of hegemony, right? Like, they have an equal seat at the table now. So you can no longer be like, well, this is what America wants. And if we're going to go, we're either going to do, you kind of lose some of that, like, negotiating power in my mind. But I mean, I don't deal with foreign politics. I can, I don't win arguments with my wife. So what do I know about the art of the deal?
But China's perfecting the art of this deal. If you haven't watched the Weird Al Yankovic video, definitely worth a shot. So,
yeah. And we will see kind of like leading up to, we should have a debate a week from today. Today's Thursday, right? Recording on a Thursday.
October 15th.
We should have the third debate of the slate, which is supposed to be a town hall style debate in Miami.
Yep.
But the
Commission
announced today that they want it to be from distance. Part of that being, President Trump having contracted the coronavirus, and that a number of people around him and in the White House are testing positive. They want to try and protect Biden as well as the people that are coming to ask the undecided voters who want to ask their questions. And President Trump very, kind of came out and said, like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's a waste of time. I don't want to be on a Zoom meeting in which every school child, parent, and teacher in America was like, dude, get over it, dude. We're on like 4 a day at least. And this idea that, well, we can't debate because we're not in the same spot. Like one of the first debates, JFK and Nixon debated from 3,000 miles apart. Kennedy was in New York and Nixon was in Los Angeles. And they, like they did not have the technology that we have today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it can be done. And it's kind of one of those things that